Hi, I'm Andrew Stevenson, and in today's video I'm going to share with you some more prompts on how to make maybe better reverse colouring books. Now, I have done a very popular video on this in the past, and I'll link to that in the description. Please take the time to watch that because I do go over the concept in more depth. Now, since I first did the reverse colouring book videos, there has been a spike of colouring books being created. So the competition is higher, but it's not massively so. 3,300 and a niche score of 56, and you could narrow this down by putting reverse flower colouring book or something like that. But I was looking through these books, and some of them are selling pretty well. This one here, for example, 6,000 BSR. So with the BSR of 6282, it's getting 37 sales, 548 a month. And if they're making $2 profit, that's over $1,000 a month they're making. But I was reading through some of the reviews, and so there are lots of good 5-star reviews, but I like reading the rubbish ones. So that one's just a fault with the delivery system, not really the publisher's fault. This one here is more around the quality of the book. So the pages are thin and see-through. Again, there's nothing you can do about that because the pages are as thick as they are. And so see, the art itself is obviously computer generated and not based on any hand-drawn watercolour art. The patterns are repetitive, big areas of blank spaces and solid colour without any overlap or tone variation. And we can do something about those things, I think. Now, in the method I showed in the previous video, there were lots of tone variation and mixing of colours, I thought, but there was a lot of white space. I'll show you a few examples of those images now. So it's things like this. The prompt I'll show you here was watercolour, forest, abstract, Rorschach, ink blot test, white background, muted colours. Now in the previous video I've explained why I use all of these terms, but basically the muted colours was an attempt to, in these reverse colouring books the interiors are generally quite dull, so the black pen that the user uses stands out more. The white background was just an attempt to make the background white rather than all the other mad colours that were coming up. The ink blot test and the abstract were because I found if I didn't use those, it just became too obvious. Like, instead of having an interpretation of a tree or a forest, it would have just done a pretty decent watercolour of a forest. But if you look at this image, you can see that there are colour tones are blended in there, and here there's loads of different shades and hues, but there's lots of white space. All this round here, and it's not a bad thing, but it was in my opinion, it wasn't a bad thing, but it was a complaint in the review I've just shown. Now, I'm not saying that book was made using the technique I've shown you, but the complaint can be found here as well. So I've been experimenting, and there is a way to fill the page. The images, it's slightly different. It's more like a very rough watercolour painting of, say, a forest, but there's not a lot of detail in there. It's quite blurry, it's quite out of focus. The colours are blended, but there's no real definition in the trunks or the leaves and the branches. And I think that's kind of what that person in particular who left that negative review wanted. So I'll show you some examples of that, and then we shall put the prompt into Midjourney in real time and see what it comes up with. And here is an example of one of the new prompts that I've tried out. Now, this one isn't perfect because there's not a load of colours, and it's still quite defined. but the leaves are just blobs. There's obviously a tree there, but there's no detail to it. The trunks can be, you can add texture to the trunks with your lines. This path you could draw pebbles in, cobbles, bits of root, things like that. So it's an obvious image in that you can tell it's a forest, but it's quite blurry and quite out of focus. And you'll see in the prompt that I did use those sort of words. Here's another image, perhaps slightly better. The tree images are all blended at the top. There are some definite trunks there which can be improved upon by the user adding lines and things like that. Branch shapes and leaf shapes can also be added in this. I hesitate to call it a mess, but it's a mess of watercolour structures. And here is another one. Again, these low bushes, tall tree trunks which can be improved upon by the adding of texture. Shapeless leaf masses, again, which the user would add detail to. So I'll show you the prompt I used for this one. And there it is there. Watercolour, out of focus, abstract, forest, trees, green and brown, not much detail. Full page, just to to encourage it to use the full area. The prompts on the previous images were slightly different. So on this one here, I used watercolour painting, out of focus, forest, muted colours. And again, good example. And this one was watercolour painting, impressionist, forest, inkblot test, muted colours. And you see there are differences. This one I think is a little bit, although I used the inkblot prompt, it's a little bit more clearly defined than the out of focus prompt that we used in the example previous. So here we are back in Midjourney, and we'll try a couple of different prompts. So this is with the watercolour painting, impressionist, forest, inkblot test, muted colours prompt. The difference between this one and the one I've shown you is that this one is using version 5. I will just upscale. Yeah, I'll probably upscale all of those, I think. You can see the upscale works quite quick in version 5. So this is good. It's got the trunks, it's got the leaf mass with no real definition, forest floor. So this is the one generated in version 4. This is generated in version 5. And just to show you how you can change from version 4 to version 5. Go to settings and click here. I will run that prompt again with version 4 just to see what it generates. So I got myself a little bit mixed up there. So this first one here is the one with the out of focus prompt in version 4. That's quite a good image there, green, yellows and all shades in between. And this one here is the first prompt we did in live. Version 4 and version 5, so same prompt. This one's got a lot more going on, a lot more colour, a lot more things for people to use. A lot more colours for people to play with. By comparison, this one seems a bit sparse. I'll now run this prompt through version 5, and this here is the watercolour painting out of focus prompt in version 5. So that's version 5 and that's version 4. It's a bit more blurry, but again, ample opportunity for people to go in there and add their own elements to it. I think of those two prompts, I prefer it in version 4. But each time you run the prompt, you get a different result. And let's not forget that the prompt, of course, can be changed. The only subject there is the forest, so we can change that. We'll change forest to flowers. Just see what happens. Again, this is in version 5. So here are the two out of focus prompts in version 5 and version 4. And version 5 there. I'll run the other prompt, which was the inkblot prompt in version 4 and 5, and show you those results as well. And here we go with those results here. So this top version is version 4, watercolor painting, impressionist, flowers, inkblot test, muted colors. Not bad at all. It's a bit too clearly defined, I think, for my liking. You can probably, and I will try this out in another video, run some sort of diffuse on top of that in your graphic software. I'm sure I could do that in Affinity. And this one is the version 5 version. This one's a lot more abstract and a lot more what you want. I think this one works better. Now there's not a lot of white space. That's the first complaint addressed. There's also a lot of mixing of the tones and the colours and things like that. You can tell it's meant to be flowers, but there's no real definition there. You've got to add the detail. So that's it for today's video. Just a quick tutorial on how you can make, I think, better reverse colouring books. The ones in the previous video, I really like the look of them as a style. But reading a few complaints that other books have got about white space, then I think this is better. So that's it for today's video. Remember, the whole point of this thing is to just explore and experiment. This is the paid for version. There is a free version, of course, of Midjourney, where you get, I don't know, maybe 25, something like that, free images to make. This costs $10 a month, and you get, I think I made maybe 400 images on my first month with the credits. So you get a lot of images. Each upscale costs a credit, depending on your settings. I use 0.5, so it halves your credits used. There's a lot of settings to muck about with. But if you're going to create a lot of images like this, a lot of colouring book images or reverse colouring book images, then it's worth paying for it. All you've got to do is get, well, as that first book I showed at the very beginning of the video was making 30 odd sales a month. Making 30 odd sales a day. You just get a third of those, a third of that person's sales, or even a sixth, and you've got enough to pay for a month of Midjourney. So yeah, that is it for today's video. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help me out. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.